Me to record the session for the benefit of those people who, like, one person emailed me from a car trip to Oregon. And so other people might be in various states of trying to log on or having to do something else. So welcome to session two. For, oops, now gotta make my slides. For today's agenda, we're going to talk about we were just having a brief conversation as people were logging on with Dara about the community environmental justice screening tool I shared. And my purpose in having a discussion about that is just to think about developing that into a kind of better tool to share with teachers. It's something I created. We can call this kind of the field testing, beta testing of a tool. Only a few people have used it, so I would like to just kind of benefit from this group's wisdom on refining that. Then we're going to talk about ArcGIS Online, or GIS generally, and story maps, a particular tool for education. It's a tool for land planning and surveying and all kinds of spatial analysis, but particularly we're going to talk about it as an educational tool. And related to that, I'm going to share again the info about the GIS mapping competition that the CGA runs each year and that I'm going to encourage and support you in entering. The registration period for schools is just opening up, so that's something we can plan for down the line. Also, we've known from the launch of the fellowship that we were going to meet in summer 2024. So I've got more info about those plans. And then something that's more just about you, which is, talking about how we're going to track and plan out what you're individually going to be focused on throughout the course of the fellowship, the types of projects, the courses that you're going to be integrating ideas and activities into. So we'll talk about that, and it's a pretty much choose your own adventure type of scenario. So we'll do a little bit of a warm-up. This maybe gives other people time to arrive. I have to remember how to do a Zoom poll. This is new to me. So I think I'm launching the poll. I practiced, and then I'll learn if somebody else can teach me. So you have to scroll down to see the multiple questions. This I learned from one of my sample test takers who might be related to me.
Is there a way to tell it to me again? Because I saw the first one and submitted already.
Oh, that's interesting.
I saw it looked like one question and I pressed submit, and then you said that almost immediately afterwards.
Anybody knows how to relaunch a poll? There was an important question about dinner, actually, was really the most important question. You'll have to tell us what your responses are as we has everybody answered? Anybody need a little more time?
It says, it seems to say next to the three dots, you can choose to relaunch it on your poll, according to Google.
So maybe, Malia, you can try the three dots and then relaunch poll.
You might have to do it though, Tom. I'm not sure.
I'm not seeing that option. It just says polls.
Yeah, I don't see that option either.
Okay.
Google may not know all.
Whoops. We can, you can tell us in the chat. We'll all be more focused on your answers when we get to those. All right, I'm going to end the poll because then I think that's what you also have to do to make it visible. So then now you can see the results. So I just wanted to see that 7 out of 10 of you explored the tool. That's cool. Maybe other people didn't get their answer. And okay, it was successful. Good. I want to hear more about that. As far as dinner, okay. Well, we need to we need to move it along. Some people are still hungry. Okay. So, and Malia, you are one who did sample, right?
I am one who did what?
Who did sample the tool. I think your positive response to the first question indicates you tried it out.
Yes, I've gone deep on that tool. Thank
Okay,
you.
cool. I think that's the only way to go on it. So, okay, well, I'm going to bring that up in a minute, but this is also my 5-minute warm up. I'm trying to think of what like warms up a brain. And I came across this phrase that grabbed my attention in this article, which I have to admit is it's kind of a business related article, and I'm not that interested in the business strategies that are discussed. But what grabbed my attention was the use of the term geospatial intelligence, which in my brain always means like military. It's always like a strategic, tactical CIA type thing, geospatial intelligence. And this is about geospatial intelligence just for like business. And that made me think, geospatial intelligence is a great concept of just being intelligent about the world and like being mindful and purposeful about how you take actions on the earth. So I was just kind of my own personal reflection on the phrase geospatial intelligence was like, this is a perfect phrase. So first of all, not the CIA version of geospatial intelligence, but we talk about this being an era of big data, and that's something that computer science is perfectly positioned to leverage. That we have complex issues and we've got critical decisions that we need to make, and if we're going to make good decisions, we really need to use the information that's available to us. We need to develop models. And it's not just that, we like actually have to have visionary thinking. This is for all the artists out there, like to actually have an idea of what's better than what exactly, what should we be aiming for? And so that idea of geospatial intelligence, I thought, is a perfect phrase for that. But then I also thought about a really different way that we might use that phrase, almost in an opposite frame of let the data speak. So if we talk about intelligence that's rooted in real world experience and environmental awareness, we might be talking about something that sounds a little bit more like traditional ecological knowledge, something that's based on living in, being connected to, and being extremely aware of the way a particular place or space functions. So if anybody has if geospatial intelligence is a phrase, maybe that's just something we can enter into our conversational lexicon. But if you've got any thoughts on it, feel free to share.
I really appreciate that, Tom. I have run into a number of groups that really don't like the idea of the traditional ecological knowledge, and that there's already been pushback from some tribes because it kind of sounds like there's this obligation to share it or something. And so I appreciate the idea of using that as a more neutral term for that kind of thing.
Great. And also, yeah, get your own. Like you don't always have to be copying off of somebody else's answers. You could like get your own. Anybody else? Okay, wasn't a quiz or anything. But to get back to the screening tool, so some of you have used the Cella website that I created, and this is kind of an outgrowth of the work that I've been kind of just slowly progressing on to use GIS as a tool to help people see the environment around them and get access to good, reliable, sometimes even authoritative information about the communities where they live, about the state they live in. So mostly that's been through ArcGIS Online and data sets that I'm able to access through there. The CalEnviro screen for tool is something that leverages that same tool set. So it's using an ArcGIS Online, what's called an experience, to basically make available state mandated data sets on environmental conditions, population characteristics, things like that. And so that's the exact information that California law says that lawmakers have to use and be aware of. It's the thing that lawyers can bring to court and say, hey, there's a known issue of disproportionate pollution burden on this community of high vulnerability, and people can't get away with doing something that exacerbates that problem. So why not have students use that information? Because when I'm talking to teachers, and not even so much teachers in the conversations I'm having, but people that are involved in teacher professional learning, people that are maybe administrators for districts or county offices, they talk about climate change education as a high priority, and then it gets really fuzzy behind that, like really non-specific, very general. And then they tend to deflect attention by speaking about the impressive level of youth leadership, and kind of like, well, maybe the kids understand these issues better, and what, like, it's become like a youth activism focus on this very generic topic, which I think is unfortunate for our collective mission of creating environmental literacy, because it's our goal to help students understand more specifically how this issue impacts them, where they live, impacts the people they care about, and actually how it's changing over time. So that's the kind of genesis of this tool and of this resource. And so my thought is it could be used in different ways. Like, one is it could be basically given to students to conduct the research, collect the information, and gain the knowledge that way. But that might require some scaffolding depending on the grade level and the kind of digital literacy of students. It might require some support and scaffolding and be kind of challenging. But also a teacher could bring that data, could spend 45 minutes compiling that data and bring it into the class and have it be the start of a conversation or the start of some kind of planning or response. You could do that for comparative neighborhoods. For example, if you teach in a community where kids come from different places. So that, I just wanted to kind of share what that's about. And what I would really be appreciative of is just any teacher guidance you can give me on what would make that a more useful tool in the classroom. And then I can incorporate some of that and continue to share this tool. It's shared on my websites currently. So feel free to put comments in the chat or just to jump off mute if you've got something you wanted to share about that.
Yeah, I have a couple ideas. So I teach high school and it's ninth grade ethnic studies and geography. So this is like covering all the things, perfect content for what we were doing in our classes. And I chose to do the high school that I work at, where I completed this activity. And it was different than what I thought it was going to be because of the comparative neighborhoods. The students don't all live right there where they go to school, but I bet that they know a lot of things about their specific neighborhoods and communities more than I knew. So knowing the demographics of our school, I would have assumed one thing or another, and the demographics according to the website did not reflect exactly what I see at my school. So I just thought that it would be cool for students to kind of do their own knowledge, their own previous knowledge of their communities and themselves and their families and what they see in their neighborhoods first. So to have them hypothesize about the age ranges and the races, the income, employment rates, how many people own their homes, how many people have experienced health issues, or all the various things that are on the website. So I thought it'd be cool to have them kind of do it first and see how close they could get to it being accurate from this website. So I think, and we often do that first. Like, what is your prior knowledge? What do you already know going into this? And then we kind of compare it to see how it is based on what we can research there. So I think it makes it personal. And ethnic studies is always about them. I just say I'm a facilitator in the classroom. So I think it would be cool. I would definitely start it like that. I think I would ask, who do you think lives in your neighborhood? And they know more than I do. So that's where I would start.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. And I love that idea of like just encouraging a little bit of, well, what do you think? What do you know? Because even people who really know neighborhoods, I find it's more misconception than knowledge. And it's because everybody has partial views. You know, they have a little network that kind of is their path through a neighborhood, and they see certain things and don't see other things. And it's hard to know what you've never seen. So thanks.
Yeah.
One piece from a rural perspective, that really stood out to me that I would put toward my students is afterwards considering, you know, what are the factors that might dilute different populations, and or you know, in what way does it describe your area more or less? So for example, our census tract includes Ferndale, which is a little urban town. And then huge portion of the space is the rest of us, which is not as big a population, but takes up much more of the geographic area. And we're very isolated. And so it's really interesting to kind of think about, okay, so there's this one town and they have municipal water and they have, you know, regular grid systems and they have, you know, a dump and all of these other things that don't apply to the rest of us. And so it's really interesting to kind of look at that data and be like, okay, well, this really should not be categorized the same if you're really looking at, you know, access to medicine or any of the other different things. And so just having that reflective piece where you're like, okay, what are some of the things that are not described here if you were really trying to describe your population, and what subset of this broader pocket are you, you know, are you representing?
Thank you for sharing that. And I just pulled up this example, and thanks for adding the context, Jeff, of the population of the community. This is from Renee's assessment, and she's color coded it. And now I'm not sure why the color coding disappeared. But so just to give Renee full credit, she color coded because that's what the instructions said to do. So just to see, like in her area, it was low for a lot of things, you know, related to traffic and diesel particulate matter, and then high pesticide use. That's totally the opposite. I will show you my neighborhood in a minute, and it's like the opposite of this. I've got all the other things, but not pesticide use. And I have but impaired waters. That's something we share. Impaired waterways. So I think for students, isn't it eye-opening to know there's all of this data just accessible to them, and that they can instantly compare where, like, so let's see if this works. Oh no, results. So this is my census tract right here. So it's not so great, really. I'm 87th percentile, 85th pollution percentile. This made me kind of consider moving a little bit. But look at the freeway boundary between the part where I live and right over here, just like a quarter mile west, 34. That's a pretty significant difference. So like in your neighborhood, some of the things your students might know is the transition between these different neighborhoods, the different kinds of places that these are. right? And if we're a person who doesn't necessarily live in the same place that our students live, it can be hard to know, hard to get a feel of what's going on there. In the indicator maps, this is particularly problematic at my house is hazardous waste facilities, it turns out. So I found it fascinating that it not only measures it, like in this case, there's no actual hazardous waste facilities inside my census tract, but it's the proximity and the number of facilities within proximity to the census tract that make it kind of show up as a high number there. So, okay. I wanted to, so I'm going to stop sharing that for a minute. And thank you guys for experimenting with the tool and for taking it on to your students. Ooh, look at all these comments. Okay, excellent. Awesome. I'm glad I'm glad we're not going through a troubleshooting of what didn't work. This is good. This is a good thing. So I'm going to go back over to you guys are probably in the slide. So here's the slide I put together that I just want you to know how absolutely excited I am about not just this tool, but the dashboard. And I don't know if anybody found the dashboard particularly. I'm going to show it to you in a minute. So the maps, the different indicator maps with all of that information, those are individual map layers in a geographic information system map, a GIS map. So the ozone score, that's one layer. The particulate matter 2.5 is another layer. But then when you look at the results map, you're seeing the combination of all those layers. It's like a formula based on all those different factors, right? And so you can go to something called the dashboard, which is created in ArcGIS Online, which basically just puts all of these data points at your fingertips so you can manipulate them. So it's a lot like Cal Virus Screen, but just like if you just turn the faucet on full blast, it's all coming at you at one time. So I was just thinking about some general questions that students might have, like how much difference is there between places in California? And maybe they more specifically mean like the places like where I live and the other places where it seems like people might be in a different situation, either worse or better off. And then, a more particular question that we might ask about environmental justice issues being related to legacies of white privilege in particular, right? So I'm now going to show you the Cal Virus Screen dashboard, and sorry to your family members if you're showing them this later because you think it's cool, but you might because it's a masterpiece. Okay, so now I'm going to share my screen again over here. So this is the dashboard, and it starts with the results, right? This is the combined score. So you can right away kind of see a geography of environmental differentiation. And remember that the total score is combined with two things, pollution burden. So that's like an environmental condition outside. But the other score that's taken into account is an actual characteristic of people that is indicated. Now, they may be health conditions people have acquired, but some are just taken as positions of vulnerability. Things like being elderly or being having your language that you speak be other than English. So you're maybe not as able to get help or to identify issues going on around you. So we could see right away, like, anybody want to just describe the geography of environmental or pollution burden in California in one or two sentences? Anybody want to take a crack?
Centralized in the Central Valley.
Central Valley. Also, where else? Like the big urban areas, right? So LA, Bay Area, Sacramento. So
Can I
there's
ask
kind
a
of,
question?
yes.
Can I ask a question? What's this orange over here? What does that reflect in that big? Is that Riverside? What county is that? I can't see it.
Yeah, so this is a bit of, so this is San Bernardino County, Eastern San Bernardino County. And so my suspicion is that there's a lot of transportation related issues with Interstate 10 going through, but also probably a lot of disposal and things related to being on the perimeter of the LA area. The other thing this brings to, this is perhaps the largest geographic area on the map, which means it's the most empty. And the larger the area, the more variation you're going to expect within that pollution burden, right? Because you're talking about an area that's the size of a county. As opposed to if we zoom in on one area here in LA, it might just be a couple blocks, right? And it's because it's population based. So that the area that's being mapped is census tract. So when you look at the census tract, and this is challenging sometimes to clear. So we have 8,000 some census tracts. Let me get my windows. 8,035 census tracts in the state. So some of them are very, very large areas because there's low population. Some of them are very small areas. The highest population density in California is 151,000 people per square mile. So it gets pretty dense. So you can just use this dashboard as a way to quickly drill down on your census tract and get all the data right here, because on the right-hand side, behind this quick stats, like this dashboard level, there's also a graph of each and every individual indicator. So if we click on that and try and figure out what's going on with their orange, we can see where they're high: cleanup sites, groundwater threats, solid waste, but also some population variables like low birth weight and high unemployment. So that's what's going, quite like right away, that's what's going on there. That's why they're orange. And if we want to talk about environmental degradation, we can be much more specific than just saying, oh, climate change makes everything worse. And you can also get just the census data at a census tract level as well, to get the race ethnicity information. Okay.
Tom, did you say there was a way you could separate it out on the map where it only showed some of the layers? Like there's can you kind of say, like show me the visual, but
excellent question.
Only these
yes.
pieces.
Excellent, well-timed question, Malia. Thank you for that. Checks in the mail. All of these things on the left side are filters. So it's like shopping, right? Everybody's going to have a negative experience of shopping soon because some website's not going to work, but this website works really well. So whatever variable it is, you can actually find out, like, where's that happening? Or you can pick a city, a Senate district, assembly district. Like maybe you tell your students, like, well, who helps change the situation? Find out who the people in your local government are. Do some research and write a letter and be like, what's your plan on this? How does this get better? Right? So you could research an assembly district. You can look just at disadvantaged communities. So disadvantaged communities is a very specific definition that meets a standard, like I was saying, that lawmakers are required to reference this information. Disadvantaged communities are given a higher level of protection. You can see what it did is it pulled out all those orange and red ones, right? So they're just the highest indicator. And then there's some really specific other variables that change. So you can see the disadvantaged communities, by the way, taken for them, their score overall is 85. The pollution burden is actually a lower share of that than the population vulnerability. But this is over a quarter of all census tracts that meet this criteria of disadvantaged. So, it's not extreme disadvantage. This is kind of, think of it as the lowest quartile in terms of the characteristics that are taken into account on Cal-Enviro screen. So my two little bubble questions here were, one is like, are places that different? And I think it's pretty obvious to see how this dashboard can see that. But let's to help answer the question Malia asked and the question that I had about environmental justice connected with legacies of white privilege. So you can go down here and look at all of the different race ethnicity variables. And so, for example, I can look at just the percent of the population that is Black. So the values range from -1 to 85. If you notice the little note, -1 represents null values. So just think of that like a NA, not available. But keep an eye on the right-hand values, right? So when we consider all census tracts, they're going to be all 50s because the average is the average. But if we just look at census tracts that are, say, 35% Black, what happens? It gets a lot worse a lot quicker. So we can say that's kind of social racism, or we can say it's an economic outcome that's related to racism, but it's pretty easily demonstrable. And we can just keep ticking that up and see that at 50%, we only have 62 census tracts out of 8,000 that meet the criteria of 50% or more Black. That's very few places. Do you notice something about them on the map? You don't see them.
They're located in LA.
LA.
They're these little tightly packed places down here. I'm guessing there's going to be a couple up here. Those are our 62 census tracts that are 50% Black. Here's something that's kind of interesting, just to so you can show how whatever the mechanisms have been, racial segregation has put Black people in harm's way as far as in pollution burden, and that may be the kind of the leverage for the population characteristics or not. But look, if I put this all the way up, like to 77 or higher, these are the Blackest census tracts in California. So there's some of those that we just saw, right? There's just a few of them here. And see if there's a few up here. Maybe not even. Nope, they're all in LA. But if you notice, the score went down. It went down appreciably. When we went from 62 to 10, the score went from like 76 to 66. So it tells me there's two different things we could talk about this from this data. One is segregation still exists, and people that are non-white might be in harm's way related to pollution burden. Also, those same people can have agency, and they can move into neighborhoods that are majority Black that are better than those other places, right? So some of these places that are highest concentration of Black population actually exhibit better characteristics. So it's not a linear relationship between a higher proportion Black population, a higher pollution burden. I find that very interesting.
One of the things that we did, I live in LA, and my kids, we looked at redlining and the practices of redlining, and looked at the census tracts from the communities that were within the red line, and then the rest as part of the environmental justice stuff we did, and it aligns just perfectly, all those practices, because they carry over. People can't afford to buy housing, outside of those areas that historically, I mean, it's been 50 years, but people,
right.
Communities are still trapped. So this is it's a great tool.
And so thank you for that comment. It's so much information. I mean, I feel like I could teach a semester-long class on this. So similarly, now I just filtered for almost exclusively white population, and you can look at how dramatically different, not only the scores, but also the geography of it, right? There's a whole different set of places that it's not surprising that we've got low pollution burden if you're in the High Sierra, really. But even if we lower this down to 75%, now we've got places all right around those disadvantaged communities. Now we've got the contrast of very white places that are very environmentally favorable that are within just a couple miles of very Black, or if we look at Latino, we can get the same kind of relationship there. Not quite as strong on the high end about the change, I believe. We can take a look at that. So first of all, if I put just 54% Latino, the score is very similar to what happened with Black, went way high, right? And then, but it's a lot more census tracts. It's 2,200 census tracts that meet that criteria. If I go down to 50, it's 2,500. So it's more. And if I keep going up, it gets worse. So, yeah, it basically gets worse. So that's interesting. Like, what's different there? Maybe the longer history of African American kind of awareness of racial struggles has helped create more strategies than for Hispanic, maybe much on average newer arrived populations. I'm not just theorizing there. So anyway, that's the dashboard. And I think between the tool to get local information and guide students through these indicators, right? Because if you've done that tool, you can go look at your worksheet and see, well, what does solid waste mean? Oh, they measure solid waste by the proximity of waste handling facilities. So it's like a recycling center or a landfill. That's basically what a solid waste handling facility is. Okay. Now I'm checking in on the chat. Is there a way to add a layer that can turn on school districts over the census tracts? Excellent question, Lara. And this is why we need to use ArcGIS, because all of these same layers that go into this CalEnviro Screen dashboard are available to any ArcGIS user who has an account. So yes, in that case, you can bring whichever, all of these or just some of these layers in, and then you can drop over top of that layer of the school locations. Much like I did when we started the last session, I had your guys' individual locations over the top of this map. So I just did that for the schools that, or for maybe it was, yeah, for the schools that you put on your applications. Okay, any other questions about that? Anything else I missed? Yeah, Indigenous land reservations right there here, and also the population. So there's just so much information there. Okay, so what are we going to talk about next? Okay, so actually we'll follow up on that question. So the smart people who created CalEnviro Screen and the data dashboard, they work for California Office of Environmental Health. I forget what the actual anyway, they're a state agency, right? And they're professionals with public health degrees, and they're the officials tracking this information, and they're using ArcGIS Online, which is, you know, like we might use Microsoft Word to type up a paper. They've used ArcGIS Online to create this interactive map experience. That very same software is free to any teacher that wants to, or any school, I should say, set up an account. The accounts are one per school. And all you need to do is go on the website and register your school. The first thing that'll happen is they'll check to see if you already have an account, and they'll try and link you up with the person who created that account. There's a lot of dormant accounts, so you might be resuscitating an account, but you can use that software to create maps, produce maps. There's a whole suite of different software that you get access to, but also you get access to some of these data layers that are created by officials that are kind of behind a paywall, so to speak. So once you have an account, you can get access to those where you might not be able to if you didn't have an account. interesting, important thing to know about ArcGIS Online is it's totally cloud-based software. So it's just like anything else that you log into through a web browser. It doesn't require any installation of anything on people's computers. So it doesn't have to involve your IT folks with your school district unless you want their help. One thing that I think is kind of useful if you plan on using it with students is for them to get the single login that students do on the computers to be their login for ArcGIS Online. Otherwise, you're asking them to keep track of a login, individual student login. But also, like a school could get an account and only teachers use it to create maps to share with students. You don't necessarily have to take the full leap into having students produce maps. One of the things, it says survey 123 here. So one of the things you can do with ArcGIS Online is conduct surveys that utilize or collect location information. So it's what I had you guys respond to before the first session to create that map layer. You each told me where you were. So then when I uploaded the results of the survey, it dropped dots on the map that I could put over top of the Calendar screen results. I've seen students use these surveys to do like field assessments, like walking around. If students ever feel like there's a need for like some infrastructure repair or something, they can stop right there and make a note and essentially drop a pin on a community map and kind of crowdsource information like that, or they can interview people on the street about their experience of the neighborhood surroundings, and that can be located on the map. So you're gonna see a lot of ArcGIS Online throughout the next year. So I just wanted to introduce it to those of you who it's totally new to, so that you know that there's some stuff you can do. So first of all, there's a bunch of stuff that you can do without a login. So if everything I just said to you, you were just thinking, gee, Tom, that's a lot of hassle. No, thank you. Then this is for you. You can, just like I did right now, nobody had to log in, and I had you looking at maps and analyzing data and thinking geographically, right? You could do that same kind of thing. So there's web maps that I can make available to you. There's things called map apps, which is like the experience. There's story maps, which I'm going to show you some more of in a minute. And then there's some like curriculum materials. Esri, the company that makes ArcGIS Online, has created some like lessons that integrate into a live map, just like, basically I did too with my EJ screening tool. But there's our more traditional subject align. American history, world history, geography, but also literature and math and other subjects. So those are things that you can look into. Any question? Anybody that's already using story maps?
I've used story maps, but right now I'm exploring the S3 Geo inquiries thing because I've always I struggled initially with the whole login thing with S3, and I had to communicate with the multiple. These things are fantastic. These little 15 minutes are completely aligned to our AP environmental science or the course exam description. It's like these are amazing. Excellent. Super cool and easy to access and link.
And they are, Esri is very serious about wanting to get more teachers and students using GIS. It's been a slow process. And one of the things that they were maybe a little slow to figure out is like, teachers don't have time to learn a new software. And even if the teachers had time to learn it, teachers don't have enough time in class to maybe scaffold the whole learning process for students to make maps. So you've got to present some stuff that people can use without having to always create it. Like there's lots and lots of things that students use to learn, like books, that they don't necessarily spend as much time creating as they spend reading and referencing, right? So I'm a big proponent of, I was in a meeting on Saturday training teachers and using our California Atlas, and my co-presenter said, you know what we don't do? We don't try to make work for teachers who show up a workshop on Saturday. So this is also true of people who show up on Tuesday night of break. I don't really feel that great about telling you, like, take on this big thing because there's a great payoff. Because I think actually there's some cleverer ways to leverage the non-login options, and it's just easier. So one of the things I've been doing is like, okay, Esri maybe doesn't have that much time or resource applied to this, but also Esri's a big national or really international company, so they're not thinking that much about California. Somebody's going to think about California, it's got to be us. So I've been trying to think about how to create story maps that help people interact with maps without having, and to think about them without having to create them. Just like the printed atlas I took to fourth grade teachers in Long Beach this Saturday, there's all kinds of worksheets and inquiry activities we have for the teachers to do around the atlases. We never once say, stop and have your students make another map. Would be a great activity, fine if they do that, but that's not how we did that. So just because maps are electronic doesn't mean we instantly have to imagine students making them. So these are 4 maps I've made, just kind of like my EJ screening tool, the philosophy being like helping people use geospatial tools to get into the places and the issues that are interesting to them. So like I just made this one about capitals and county seats, which I'm really kind of geeked out about, but I'm not going to make you watch right now. But that's like, these are ones that are very specific to California, or about a state park, Crystal Cove in Orange County, or about California missions, which is one of the topics in our fourth grade atlas. Okay. Laura's saying she used the geo increase in the past. Yeah, they're kind of clunky. You making story maps is much easier than making web maps. We're gonna look at that. Yeah. Okay, so let's look at a story map together. I'm gonna do this. So this is my first pandemic story map creation, which was for Black History Month in 2021. And I was part of, you'll notice a theme with me, which is if people are general, I want to get specific. So we were having conversations when we were doing a lot of conversations and very little teacher professional learning, because none of that was going on. And there was a lot of enthusiasm over anti-apartheid teaching, addressing anti-Black racism, and people were really enthused by that conversation that was happening at a national level. And in our California circles, people were making an assumption that turned out I didn't think was very correct. So I'm going to stop sharing that slide. I'm going to start sharing. You probably clicked through on the story map probably already. Maybe. Okay. So again, I'll just kind of walk you through my purpose of doing this. By the way, my idea partially was to make this a little bit of a show and tell, so that there wasn't too much deep thinking before break, but also because I feel like I just need to kind of share some of what I see as the tools that we could be leveraging over the next few months. So this is just so that you could think about things that we could be working on together. And so I already saw that there's some interest in making story maps. And trust me, if I can make story maps, your students, and I don't even know what grade level they are, but they can make story maps, because I had no particular skill in doing this, and I'm not that fast at picking up on the technology of it. You basically build these just piece by piece. So you put in a text block, you can actually put in a live link to a website. Like I've got a live link to the census website. So basically this question is just like looking at the Black population in the United States. 12.3%, this was 2019 census data I was using, Black or African American. So there's going to be a couple things going on. One is we're going to be learning about scale and how scale affects what we see, but we're also going to be learning about the specifics of the geographic distribution of the Black population in the United States and a little bit about segregation. So first we get state level data, and I'm going to scroll down so you can see the legend. The different color just says what the dominant race or ethnic group is in each state. So all of those brown states are dominant non-Hispanic white, and the darker, the more dominant the group. So we've got California and New Mexico, also Puerto Rico showing up as green. Hispanic or Latino is the largest group. They're fairly light green because it's not that dominant. If I zoomed in on Hawaii, which I'm not going to do, but it's going to show up pink. So pink being, it's actually kind of purpley, Asian population being the largest single group. So among the 50 states, there's no state that actually has a plurality of Black population. Even I'm from Washington, D.C., it was more than 50% Black when I lived there, but by 2019, it was less than 50% Black, even though that's the largest group. And again, if I zoomed into D.C. right here, you'd see it's the only one that shows up in this kind of mustard color. But there turns out to be 4 states that are over 30%. Those are the most Black states. And then there's 4 states that are less than 1% Black. Those are the least Black states. So you can click on any one of these states and you actually get raw numbers. So if you want to answer my question, you best be doing some math, right? So I can do some quick math in my head and say, this 5,000 of 916,000 white people in Montana, that's less than 1% without even looking at the other groups, right? So like on the low end, we see a geography up here in Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, I forget what the other state was, that was under 1%. And you could probably guess where the over 30% was. Anybody want to guess? Give me one state.
Mississippi.
Mississippi, yes. Let's click on Mississippi. Yes, this would definitely count because we have almost, 80% as many Black or African American as white. So that's definitely one of them. Turns out to be right across here, Louisiana, Mississippi, Georgia, I think it's Alabama too. So, okay, anyway, you can also ask some interesting questions like, so I just said which were the blackest states based on percentage, but which state has the most Black people? And I already answered this last question, but students could look at that map and see which other racial or ethnic groups have an experience of being the majority in at least one state or territory. If you're signing up as ArcGIS online as educators, you want a free K-12 educational account. So it turns out it's Texas. Because it's got a large population, even though it's a lower proportion, Texas has 3.4 million Black residents, which turns out to be the largest state population. So I could also put a link in here to a article about maps that W.E.B. Du Bois took to Paris to talk about the distribution of the Black population after slavery. And you could see the same states we were just talking about. So then I also put in some math here. So if you look at state and territory level, the mean is 10.8%. That's lower than the mean for the percentage for the country. That's interesting right there. And it ranges from a low of a high of 45.7 to a low of under 1 with a standard deviation of 10.6. So now it's like, okay, that's great, but we didn't necessarily learn that much. So we're going to go look at county level. And if we look at the 3,220 counties, we already see a different mean, right? Because the mean is the value that's the average, a different max, and a different standard deviation. So what this says is that there's actually a bunch of counties that have a Black population higher than 20%. And that's what happens when you zoom in. It's the same data set, it just resolves at a county level. So you can immediately see where these counties are, and you can see that some, the yellow ones, are majority Black, but most of them are majority white still, even though they have more than 20% Black population. And you can see they're mostly in this belt of the Southeast and then peppered around in large urban areas. This is a result of what historical event? Great Migration. So we can see
teachers on Thanksgiving break here, Tom.
I know. Sorry, this is just me. I just do this.
No, I love listening to you speak because you're so knowledgeable and interesting and multifaceted. So continue. I'm just saying.
So you know, you can just absorb it as a information overwash and then go, oh yeah, sometime we'll go back and think about that, right? So, but you can start to see segregation happening, right? Because at the state level, it's like, well, there's really no place that's too concentrated or too exclusionary, with the exception of those 4 states that were below 1%. But we can say we actually find 9 counties in the state where Black populations are more than 75% of the total population. All of those counties are in Mississippi, Alabama, and Virginia. And if we compare to white non-Hispanics, it's actually 65% of all counties where they experience that being 75% or more of the population. So that means most people, most places, white people experience being in the majority. In very, very few places, only 9 counties, and only in those 3 states, do Black people have that experience of being 75% of the population, right? So that's kind of interesting. And if you think about, like, where is the Black population concentrated in the North or the Northeast, right? You can find out that it's New Jersey. It's maybe not places that you thought of off the top of your head. So then I go in one level deeper. And so no county exceeded 90% Black, but actually there's 579 census tracts, right? We've just been looking at census tracts in California. There's 579 census tracts in which Black residents comprise 95% or greater of the population. The reason I use that indicator is that's what they used in South Africa as a measure of apartheid, maintenance of apartheid. So where do you think they are? Do you think they're going to be in those same places that we just said? It was Virginia, Alabama, or whatever else it was? Or do you think it's going to be somewhere else? So just like we heard earlier, I think Jamie said, you know, it's fun to see, what do you think? What do you know? Where do you think these very Black spaces are going to be in? Anybody? Just venture a guess. Where do you want me to zoom in on first? Well, I'm going to DC.
Wow.
Because that's where I'm from. So there we go. Even in DC, even in Chocolate City, right? These particular census tracts have a very specific population. This is what's known as Anacostia, southeastern DC. It's a majority Black space. So these most Black spaces are in the highly Black area. Baltimore, multiple census tracts that you would see of 95%, right? We looked in LA before when we were on Cal Enviro screen. No such place here. What do you think, Oakland? Let's go over here, let's zoom in. No. So this, by the way, this is what happens to you if you insist on having a conversation with me about something that's not real. I make a very long story map to get to my point, which is we don't have those places in California. And if you come to your school in California with your new enlightenment and want to address legacies of racism, and you're in California and you open that conversation with anti-Black racism, you're not exactly hitting the nail on the head. Doesn't matter where you are. We have actually 2 majority Black public schools in all of California. 2. And they're in exactly the places that I just zoomed in on. One in South LA, one in Oakland. And they're both charter schools. And they're exactly like those neighborhoods I showed you in Cal Enviro Screen. They are selective communities of support, saying in a sea of anti-Black racism, we choose to go to an all-Black school or to a majority Black school. But we don't have those neighborhoods in California that they have in other parts. So that conversation the country was having makes a lot of sense if you're here. It also makes a lot of sense if you're in Chicago, Detroit, Cleveland, New York, Philadelphia. This is an important conversation to be having for all of these people that live in communities where they walk around thinking Philadelphia is white because it is. I have friends that live in Philadelphia because it is where they live. It is where they go. It is where they work, where they went to school. But it's not around the corner where they never went. It's not across the river in the part of town they just had no reason to go to. So that level of attention to just like, let's go out there and find out what's the real situation so that we can focus our conversation. So Jamie also gave the perfect example. I mean, what I would hope would be the way, not just in ethnic studies, but in other courses, that if there's going to be some kind of focus that includes the local place, that you work on students first thinking about what they think about it, and then confronting that set of ideas with new information that might challenge their preconceptions, might confirm some things they thought they knew. So that's my story map. When you're in a story map and you expand it, you have to hit that little button to get back. That's like a little inside knowledge. So all of this is just like building a website. If you've ever used something like Wix or like what you see is what you get type website builder, it's just a bunch of blocks of things. And then when it comes to putting a map in, you can just create the map right there. You can also, like in this case, I'm pulling through layers that were already saved on my account, but it doesn't have to be that way. If you looked at the capitals and county seats map, the first 2 are ones I just actually made in the story map. Yeah, it's a story map tour, so it shows you how the capitals have moved all over the place. See, this will amaze your families.
I couldn't find the link to that one. Am I clicking it wrong?
If you just click on the picture in the slide. Did I not do that right?
It could be me. Thanksgiving break again. But that's like with 5th grade. I could tie that in with all the capital stuff.
So if you go to calgeography.org, hold on, I'll get you on. Sorry about that.
Thank you. No, but thank you for having it. I'm just so excited. That'll be something fun because we're right in the middle of memorizing all that and, delving into it a little bit.
I'm excited if anybody uses it because I'll admit making story maps is a little bit addictive, and it turns out to be better than the other thing I was supposed to be doing most of the week. So then I'm like, I've got this idea and I need to do something with it, and so I produced one of these story maps. And so that's why my initiative to get feedback from you on the EJ screening tool, I'm like, if I'm going to be doing this, I should work on getting better at it.
You sound like my husband. He'll be working at night. I'm like, didn't you work during the day? He's like, well, I worked. Yes. Not what I was supposed to be doing, but I worked.
Yeah, sometimes the most productive things are things you weren't supposed to do. And so also down that same alley, since the end of my story map ends with a question that students would go off and have to research on their own. I put a couple of links in here about, do you think America is still in the process of segregating, or is that going away? Because a lot of people, like when I teach college students, they'll say, but that used to be the case. And I'll say, no, it's more now than it was before. When you thought it used to be more, that was less. Now it's more. So adjust your thinking. And so this is just one is a recent NBC pretty decent research piece about how segregation's increasing. And then this from Brookings Institution, that's a reputable little organization, showing just from 1950, where 87% of the population inside the city of a metro, these are the 50 largest metro areas, 87% white, now to 36% white. So that white flight thing is very true, right? But also look at this. Also, everybody else flew. And so white people just keep moving. So they're now beyond the suburbs to the exurbs, and they've discovered rural living and Subarus. But they're, this is very much a transition where the center of the action, the most densely populated, the most diverse places tend to repel white population over time. But it's not that the only ones. I have a friend who researched Black suburbanization in the 1920s. It happened in Jim Crow places. There was still Black suburbanization. Okay, how late am I going? It's pretty late. So I'm not going to say too much more about this other than to say that on the Cal Geography website is information about the story map contest. The thing that happens is a school registers. In reality, it's almost always just a teacher who's decided to do it with their students and registers. If there happens to be two teachers from the same school who have the same idea, then there is some requirement to collaborate, because each school can only send 5 entries. So this suggests Esri, who is the software provider, organizes this competition. That suggests that you're doing a school-wide competition. There's no requirement for a competition. You just can only enter 5. And so any way you choose to nominate 5 to the statewide competition is fine. The other important thing to learn about or to focus on is it's only 1 or 2 students per story map. So one thing that's been a really good winning strategy for some teachers that have been doing this for a while is they do like a class project. And then within the class project, the students do their own story maps using like on a common theme, so that the teacher is able to kind of support them in developing it, but the actual presentation is different for the different students. That's allowable too. And I have some ideas of like starters and things, but like that the topic of the story map has to be California or something in California or someplace in California. So even just doing the CalEnviroScreen tool and turning the results and the student project into, like if you did that at a class level and then had students produce maps, story maps based on it, would be perfect, right? Because that's all California data. Students would have some map layers to work with right there. So just an idea. The actual entries aren't due till April 19th. So this is not something that anybody needs to get on right away, but the deadline for schools registering comes up in March. Okay, any questions about that? I'll bring this up again, I'm sure, and there's, questions. I anticipated. Hey, Lara, look at us. Look what happened during this month. I was in South Carolina at the National Council for Geographic Education, and 2 other Californians were there. 2 other. Hey. 3 out of 39 million showed up. So that was Lara and me with Ashley Paneer from Cal State Fresno and Lemoore High School, I think. So a high school teacher who also teaches methods courses and geography courses actually at local colleges. So anyway, just slipping that in there since I didn't have anything else to do with it. Also, you had the shirt, I then went and saw a snake and a frog. I had to slip in my snake and a frog picture.
We didn't see anything like that. We just saw spiders and we heard the birds.
Yeah, there were quite a few spiders. Yeah, that's why groups don't tend to see the snake. I actually stood next to a group of 3 people pointing out a mushroom for like 10 minutes with this snake literally almost touching me, and then was going to leave, and there was a gall, like a growth on a plant that was resting like on the snake's back. So I'm looking at the gall going, but what is that? And then I realized that it was a snake suspended up in this bush. So anyway, I'm not going to give another iNaturalist presentation, but a whole nother way to tap into a map of real data about your community, about biodiversity. So we'll get back to iNaturalist another time. The star of this slide is Laura. Awesome job going to the, oh, come on now, that's not what we were supposed to do. Here I said I wasn't going to do that, and then I did. I switched over. Okay, summer workshop. Summer workshop is happening, and it's happening in San Diego. We had a conversation about maybe we could be flexible, but the fact is time gets short, and this makes it easy. So while we may have budget to convene again sometime, the July trip will be to San Diego. All the travel and costs that people would incur to come are going to be covered by the grant. There are accommodations. Everybody's going to be at on-campus apartments, individual assignments. So there's probably, I'll get more details from Stephanie on that, but there's probably opportunity to have other people stay, but I'm not entirely sure. I'll get clarification on that. And then the way most of the meals would be covered is with like a card that you can use at the different places on campus. So if to somebody, this is all my way of saying, if somebody does want to take on the opportunity to bring somebody else to San Diego, that might work. To, you know, then you'd be able to eat with them, presumably paying with some other method. So we'll be meeting on Monday and Tuesday from like 8:30 to 4, and then on the Wednesday we'll cut it off at lunch so that people can get home on that day. That can be, you know, a travel day as well. Stephanie is working on the information. By the way, thank you to everybody for signing the paper that needed to get signed to make us all official. And thank you to Stephanie remotely for doing that for me, because I would never get through something like that. She will also provide us with information about airline ticket purchasing, because USD requires that if they're going to process the payment for the airfare, they want to process the purchase. So that's the good part about that, is there's no out-of-pocket expense for you and waiting to get reimbursed for a costly air ticket. So you can be thinking about, if you are somebody who's going to fly, where which dates and which airport you'd want to go from, and you'll be ready to give Stephanie that info. Any questions about that?
Now, Tom, the people that are in San Diego, I assume we just commute. We're not going to be staying there, right? We can just go home up to the end of the day or do whatever.
You will be released to go home if you would like, Gina. But you also, if you want to stay, you want to make it like camp and not tell anybody where you went. You have the option. But yes, if you would prefer to go home and, you know, check that the house hasn't burned down or anything, you can do that.
Thanks.
The other good part about this, in addition to me getting a whole lot of support for all the processing, is then if people are interested, I have, you know, field trips on the ready for San Diego. So in the evenings, we could go do stuff, you know, since it's July, it'll be light till 7:30, 8 o'clock at least. So we could go out and, you know, buzz around town and look at some landscapes or things like that, or go to the water, whatever people want to do. We'll try and figure that out. So the only thing you're responsible for is for that work time. So I wanted to carve that out. And you've got other travel plans around it, that's fine. Everything else will be optional. Are we good with that? Okay. I have one more major topic for today, and this is the one that really probably matters the most. But basically, I've said to you guys that it's up to you to really scope out what you want to be doing during this fellowship. You've already experienced some of how we're going to be kicking it off, which is with me trying to just kind of offload onto you some of my thinking up to this point about what's useful, what some of the possible tools or resources or directions are for combining computer science and geography. I'm sure I've only scratched the surface, so by no means feel like this is a direction that you have to pick up on. But at some point, I want to make sure that what you're investing your time and thinking is something that you'll make most value out of down the road. So what I'm imagining is, and I will grab a link in a minute, because what I've done is kind of thought about a process. So first of all, I'd like to encourage you to just be thinking right now about opportunities to integrate something new into your instruction that does two things. One is it does something you already have been trying to do, right? Your own goals, your own student interests, something that's already important and priority to you. Yes, that's what we want to do. And also something that can showcase or leverage the power of computer science and geography in some way, that intersection. Doesn't even have to be utilizing computers. It can be computational thinking about hard copy maps. It really doesn't have to be technology dependent. We'll talk more about how computational thinking can happen without computers, but it can also, like the story maps, it can use computer science as a pathway to deliver experience and connection for students. There's a lot of different things. So right now you're just thinking about opportunities, like where's there a good spot in your courses, in your thinking, and then where's there an opportunity to plug in something that uses computer science and geography. Then basically, as you're identifying those opportunities, you're going to start documenting your process and your progress, and you're going to do that to be periodically prepared to share your work or to be part of a conversation in a way that talks about your specific project. The reason I put this as step number 2 is you might do some scoping or some talking to folks or assessment to identify opportunities. Maybe you did a survey with students or you had a conversation, anything like that that's part of that identifying opportunities and kind of focusing your work. I'd love to know what you did. Ultimately, all of that kind of thinking and opportunity identification is going to lead to identifying some objectives, like some specific things where you're like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to create a lesson plan that utilizes that resource, or that leads students to create a map, or that just takes a new approach to a topic that you're already teaching. And I'm calling them smart objectives just to encourage people to be like realistic and maybe think in smaller bites, or to not think only about something that's like developing a whole new lesson. Maybe it's just a part of a lesson that you've already got, or so you can kind of scale this as much as you want what that objective is. But I'd like it to be something that you can really kind of say this is specifically what it is and when it'll be done, because that helps other people support you, right? So we're going to be a group of people that meets once a month, but that can also collaborate at other times. And I want to be able to direct support and resources to you if that's helpful to get you to your objectives, right? So that's an important part of it. And also, it's not just that you're going to be developing something, you're going to be piloting something. So part of the output for what we promise to deliver to the subject matter projects to get the grant funds that we're using is that we're going to have some experiments with combining computer science and geography and instruction. And that's just not us talking about it, but it's also then something happening where students are having some of that experience, and we're getting some benefit, just like I got benefit from having you guys use that tool. And down the road, we're going to talk about sharing, right? We're going to have this idea about, now that we did this, how do we get more juice out of it by showing it off or showcasing it, or pushing some resources and support to a next group of people that we would like to take up these ideas that we think are really useful. That is part of our grant ideas. We're going to do some conference presentations, maybe even collaborate on some publications to get information out to other teachers. So towards this end, oh, look, I put a link right in here. I'm so smart when I'm doing things ahead of time. I created a Google Doc for each person. And that's going to link you to the table. So please only do yours. Don't do anybody else's homework for them.
They're not accessible. I think you have to make them accessible, because I wasn't going to think so.
Oh, I hate when that happens. Let me see if I can fix that. Okay. Glad we got to this part. So the tool, when you get to it, is going to be just exactly like the steps I was talking about. And it's really just basically modify the document as you see fit to meet your needs. It says anyone with the link. Huh.
I got in.
We can't, I don't think we can edit it though. We can open it, but not edit it, I don't think.
Oh.
No, I can edit it. I don't know if we just, yeah, I'm not sure of it.
But you know what would be happening is, if your computer that you're accessing Zoom from is not thinking that you're the same identity as whoever I shared it with. So we can resolve that, like if you just shoot me an email, whichever other email you'd like me to share with. I just shared it with one per person. So if anybody's having access problems, I'm guessing that's what that is.
Yeah, your browser could be logged into the wrong Google.
Yeah.
Well, it's not that. The problem, it's always with Sweetwater, because our emails are .org and our Google is .net. So that's our problem. So I'll do a personal. I think the we have to do it personally now.
Okay.
Because we don't have Google with our. So anyway, it's always this problem.
So
makes you feel special, Gina.
Unlike the tool that I asked you to play around with, this is the only actual piece of homework, like worksheet, I plan on giving you. I just thought this is a good way for us to just like stay in kind of coordination in terms of what each individual person is doing. This doesn't mean that one or two people might join with another person and merge their objectives and have joint objectives. That would be fine if that's what makes sense. So don't feel like it has to be kept into separate buckets, right? People could adopt the same objective. And if it was, you're going to work collaboratively the whole way through, we could even just, switch to one sheet for two participants. So this is not to prescribe any particular way of doing it, but just to like create a conversation space where we can kind of see what thinking other people are putting into it. Chat. Okay, cool, Gina, I got that. All right, Gina, I think you should be through the gauntlet. Okay, I think I'm sharing the slides now. So that's the document we're going to track, right? So don't worry too much about the objectives now. You can see there's even some timelines on there. We don't need to get to that stuff right away, but if you're ready, by all means, put it in there and we can start having specific conversations about how to support those objectives. Mostly in the next month, I want you to come up with at least one opportunity that you're interested in. Oh, thank you, Haley. Also not on my list. We'll see if you have the same problem that Gina had the first time. All right, it says it's sharing it with you. Okay, so the only other thing that's on this slide deck, which is not stuff I'm planning to talk about, of course, questions. You could have questions still. But these are just some source documents that I wanted to keep kind of, I'll probably keep dragging these through at the tail end of all of the slide decks, just so they're always there. Some prompts for us to think about geography for computer science. And then, by the way, there's our next meeting date, also very close to a holiday. We'll get all these holidays done, then we can just have a good old boring February meeting sometime. Okay, any questions?
So Tom, is the Google form, is it on the slides to fill out?
So that when you click on the red circle that says click here to access, it should take you to the folder, and then there should be one with your name on it. Let me double check to see that's true. Yes, I see one with your name. Well, your initial. But if it's